In a world where hustle culture collides with wellness warnings and workplace demands keep evolving, how do we stay sharp without burning out? How do we navigate the endless stream of wellness trends while actually getting results? This is the Work and Wellness Podcast, and I'm your host, Angela Davies. Drawing from my own journey of wins, stumbles, and honest revelations, I'll be bringing you raw, unfiltered conversations with experts and inspiring guests who've been there, lived it, and found a better way. Together, we'll cut through the noise and workshop what it really means to be well in today's workplace. No more choosing between success and sanity. No more sacrificing health for achievement. Whether you're struggling with burnout, searching for purpose, or simply ready to work smarter, not harder, you're in the right place. This is real talk about real solutions for real people. Let's get into it. Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. Today, I am thrilled to be welcoming Scott to the podcast. Scott is a former AFL player and coach, having played for 10 years as an elite AFL athlete before embarking on an AFL coaching career where he led Subiaco to multiple premierships, was the defensive coach at Collingwood Football Club in the 2010 premiership year, and then became an AFL head coach. Scott has also spent 4 years working full-time in the juvenile justice system, and beyond football, he is the founder of LifeChanger, a foundation dedicated to empowering young people with resilience, self-belief and mental health support. And last year, LifeChanger helped 141,000 young people in Australia and New Zealand. So that is a huge amount of young people to impact and an incredible stat. Today, we're going to dive into Scott's journey in elite sport, talk about mindset, which is really relevant to the workplace, and discuss how parents can help their kids navigate mental health challenges, because I think if we can get on top of that when kids are young, we can take that through to our whole lives. So welcome, Scott. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Anne. It's really nice to see you. I hope you're well.
I am. Thank you. I wanted to move straight in and talk a little bit about resilience. And you played AFL and then also coached AFL. And I'd love to know what your biggest lesson or something that you learned or observed about resilience was that sport taught you.
Well, I mean, as we know, sport is such an incredible analogy for life in so many different ways. But the main thing I think you get out of, playing and coaching, I'll often say to my own kids or people that I'm in communication with that life is brilliant. We're very lucky to be living it. Life is fantastic, but life's also really tough. And that's what it is. So what you get from sport is a real microcosm of those ups and downs and those challenges. And from the very early moments, you're 7 or 8 starting your junior footy, and there's all those nerves and insecurities and am I good enough to actually step out with my cohort and my friends? And then you're trying to make representative sides and you get moments where you're validated. But you also get a lot of moments where you're not. And, so what are you going to do with that as a young person? Do you give up? Do you push on? Do you face those obstacles? And then as you get more into a professional career, there's the ups and downs of injuries that you learn a lot about what that inner voice needs to be in order to keep you getting up again. Because even though we see the sporting journey, often we see it at the Olympics or we see it on TV and you see the bright, shiny moment, where someone's going really well. But when you interview any sports person after their career, they'll talk about, the dark moments and the tough moments and how they had to find a way through those moments where at times you contemplate giving up or are you good enough? But the best sports people that have a career, they find a way through that, it's a real challenge, but it's one of the great things you get from the experience of sport.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of mindset work too, Scott. You know, it takes a really strong mindset to be able to overcome those moments of self-doubt, because I think we all have them in our lives, whether it's in sport or in our personal lives. Was there a moment in your career where you had to really challenge your mindset in sport around, do I continue? What am I going to do? Am I going to keep going? Or where maybe you felt like you were rejected and not validated, and sort of how you kept going and pushed forward?
I think there's many. I think your whole career it's not linear. The
Mm.
pathway to, and I use the word success carefully because I don't believe that the destination is necessarily the best way to define success. It's the process, because there are so many ups and downs. Every week in professional sport, you have a week where you play really well, and the next week you might not. You have a week where you win, and then you have a week where you lose. So you're constantly in this tug of war between, am I good enough? What do I need to do next? There's a lot of external pressure,
Yeah.
and then how you handle and process that pressure, which ultimately comes back down to the conversation that you have with yourself, is really, really important to drive you through. So are there moments? There's so many. Again, those early moments where you're not even sure if you're good enough to play.
Mm.
And sometimes you'll get a coach that might not give you that confidence. So you've got choices to make, are you going to take their word for it? Or
Yeah.
are you going to work through that and say, well, okay, I'm going to do the work. So there's so many. I ended up playing over 200 games of, first grade AFL football, but I probably missed about 150 games with injury as well
Wow.
over the journey. And
Mm.
I think that shows you that there's great moments and there's challenging moments, and accepting both of them for what they are is really important. So, look, there's just too many to mention, Ange, to be honest. I'll give you one small story.
Mm.
My first game of AFL football, I was really fortunate. I was best player on the ground in my first game. Back page of the paper, the West Australian in WA, big article, dream debut, right? And I talk about this guy because it was a million years ago. It's actually not me now. 3 weeks later, chosen to play in the state side for Western Australia. So incredible first 3 weeks. And then in my fourth week, I was undergoing an operation and missing 8 months of that year.
Mm.
And that's what sport is like. So it's why you really savor the highs when you have them and you enjoy those moments, because you know that it's a roller coaster. But that's why it's exciting, and that's why we masochists like to put ourselves through it as well, because, well, it's nice to challenge yourself. I'd hate to live a life on the sidelines in whatever it is, sport, life in general. It's okay to fail, and it's okay to make mistakes, because if you're not doing that, you're not really challenging yourself or testing yourself or reaching for something that might feel a little bit on the periphery of what's possible.
Mm.
Um, so I always love and respect in any field those that are in the arena and prepared to put it all out there. And the risk of failure sits right amongst that. It's part of the deal.
I love the reference to the Theodore Roosevelt quote about being in the arena, because I think it's so, so true. How did you create the mindset that failure is a good thing? Because I think, as we sort of go through school, failure is not seen as a good thing. I think we're taught when we're young not to fail, but really the beauty is in the failure. So how did you create a mindset around failure being a positive?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Look, I think often there's something that might drag you past the fear of failure. And in early days, my passion was sport. I'd get lost spending time on an oval, kicking a footy, right? As simple as that sounds now. Um, but the love of that and the passion for it was even in moments, because I used to also, when I was younger, I had this, like a lot of young people, you had this performance anxiety piece of,
Mm.
oh, I've got this event and am I going to go? in it, etc. But it was at the last moment for me, it was just always the love. It was a love and a passion for it, which would drag me into the contest, and then I would love it. And I was lucky enough that I sort of was able to thrive as well. So, but to develop that from early, for me, it came from pure passion and love for what I was doing, because that far outweighed my fear of failure, because the choice of not doing it meant I didn't get to do something that I felt was part of me, and that was not a choice I was going to make. The success failure one it's a huge thing, and it's become more and more prevalent, in all aspects of society, whether it's young people, adults, in their work life. I actually just don't buy into it. So some people will, they'll want to define you by an event. Whether that's, you might have lost a job. You might have had a great moment. Okay. You're going to have all of those. But for me, there's a journey, right? And at different points, all of that is going to be included. So why choose one defining moment? And it's one great thing you get from sport as well, is the process always outweighs the destination. So get the process right. So if you're concentrating on doing the right thing, with great values, if it's purpose-led or something that you're passionate about, and if that's your focus, the result will take care of itself, whatever that is. And sometimes it's in your control and sometimes it's not, right? But just letting the performance anxiety of the result go, and just focusing and being right there, giving it everything that you've got and being present, that's something you can control, regardless of the pressure of the circumstance. And that's a skill, it's, I actually read an article from a friend this morning, and it was a brilliant article, and I wrote this down because I knew it would come up today. But there's a Japanese idiom, and it's ichigo ichi-e. And I thought, well, what's that? And then I read a bit further, and it was one moment, one meeting, for this time only. And it really talks to me to being present, in that moment, and giving full focus to what's in your control, which is only that moment that's right in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you shared so many great lessons for work and life in that analogy, in that story too, Scott, because I think, rather than thinking about success and failure, they're all just points on the journey. And what you can control is what you're inputting to that journey, not always the outcome, if at all the outcome. We often can't control any of the outcomes in life. So I think that's a great mindset to have, and something that I think will be really relevant for the listeners. I think too, so many of us feel like we are defined by what we do or our careers or moments in life. And it took me a long time, I know, when I left banking, to not be defined as someone who was a leader in corporate, and I think what you share is really, really powerful about not being defined by that, but rather in every moment doing the best you can towards what you want to do. So I think that's a really great share.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, you stand in your own power. And we say this with a lot of young kids that we work with. Everyone's got their own skills, their own power, and their own potential, and stand in it. And yes, you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to embrace failure as well, and step forward from it. Otherwise, you just don't want to get to the end of it, right? And you don't want to be asking yourself, did I really have a go? Did I give it a crack? Did I make the most of it? And that's one of my biggest fears. That's a driver for me. And I ask myself that question all the time. My simple motto on life, or philosophy, whatever you want to call it, is make the most of it, for that is all there is. Which is a quote from Emerson. And it just really, when I saw that, it just resonated with me. It's like, when I was younger, it was make every second count, right?
Yeah.
It's got a touch more sophisticated, but the same thing. It's just
same premise.
do with that moment the best thing that you can. That's all we can ever ask.
Do you have any tips on how you do that practically, Scott? Because I think we live in a world that has a lot of distraction and a lot of external things that are really keeping our mind off the present moment. Is there a way that you focus on the present?
Yeah, look, I had that check-in. That's something that it's just always resonated with me. And if ever I feel like there's times when you might get busy or you just feel exhausted or haven't spent enough time with your family or your kids or work is, you feel out of balance. We all have them and I have them like everyone. But it's in those moments when I feel that, I always come back to that simple thing. And I guess my extended version of that is make the most of yourself, your family, your tribe, and this life. So they're my checkpoints. Probably another way to describe it was, look, at the end of last year, I went through a health scare where I had to face down cancer. And it was the first time I had a doctor say to me, well, this could affect your time on the planet, which is very confronting. And I say it with a smile, but it was really scary. But right in that moment, the thing that you sort of lean on a lot of your training, and I've been very fortunate to be in high performance spaces for a long part of my life. And the three things that came to mind immediately were family, health, and purpose. So is my family in a good place? Have I had all the conversations that I need to have with my young boys or whoever it might be? Have I done that well? And I feel like I've done the best that I can because, parenting is not perfect. And then health, and I live a pretty healthy lifestyle. I move every day. I look after myself. And the last one was purpose. Am I living right now? If it was to end right now, am I living in alignment with what I feel is purposeful? And I'm doing what I love, and I feel like, we're leaving positive impacts on a lot of people we come into contact with. So I sort of went, I feel like I'm in alignment with what I need to do. And that's really reassuring, no matter what challenges come your way. We're all going to have them. It was my turn, and we all get turns at it. But there's a grace. I think you can find a grace in how you face challenges, or a perspective. That's a skill, and that's a practiced mindset, which I think we should all think about, because we're all going to face bumps on the road. That's just what it is. That's life.
Yeah, it's what makes life life. Thank you for sharing your health experience, because I know that's obviously very challenging to share. So I appreciate you sharing that. I really appreciate too your perspective around, family, health, and purpose. And I think those are great pillars to check back in with around, if I look at all of those things, where am I sitting? And I think a lot of people could apply those, right? At any point in time, at any time doing a check-in with yourself, where are you sitting with those? And then what adjustments do you need to make? So I think that's great advice, Scott.
And I think for your listeners too, it's there's not perfection in that. I don't sit here saying that every day I live a perfectly balanced existence. I don't actually think it's attainable. In fact, I think we're in constant motion, evolving. Or sometimes our health pillar is going to be spot on, and it can take a dive. And our family piece can be awesome, and can also we're oscillating in and out of peak performance always. So for anyone listening that thinks, oh man, I've got to try and be spot on every day, you don't. You just have to have an awareness, and also you got to be kind to yourself and know that you can't get it perfect, but you can try. You can try.
I resonate so much with that, because if there's one word that I could eliminate out of particularly the wellbeing space, is balance, because I think it creates this unattainable perfectionistic idea of being able to get there. And like you said, I say all the time, things oscillate in and out. One thing will be high, one thing will be low. But on balance, if you're like, okay, I'm okay with that being like that now and I'm aware of it, then that's really all you can ask for. So I think, really, really sound take there for sure. I want to know, so you finished your professional sports career and you went into juvenile justice for a bit, Scott. What led you from professional sport into that arena?
I was fortunate that during my sporting career, I was going in and visiting at one particular place, Banksia Hill Detention Centre in Western Australia. 13 to 18-year-old, mainly boys, 65% Indigenous young guys. And I'd been visiting, and right at the end of my sporting career, an opportunity came up. And at the end of a sporting career, you're a little bit broken and a little bit buckled. So at 29, I hadn't played for 18 months through injury, and sort of you think you're going to play to 31, 32, and all of a sudden the body sort of went, no, you're not. So many athletes go through, you've looked out through that lens of being a sports person, probably from 6 or 7 years of age. And people have looked back through that lens at you too. Oh, there's Scott, the footballer, or the sports jock, or whatever. So separating your identity from what you do, particularly and when you're in a sporting career, you are all in. Like, it takes a lot of sacrifice and it's every minute, right? So when it's not there at the end, there's a bit of an adjustment period, and it takes a bit of time. So for me, I thought, I've always been passionate about young people and potential, and I've always been passionate about environment, like create a great environment, and you always see the best in people, right? Or you see them thrive. Doesn't matter whether they're 8-year-old kid in junior footy, professional athlete, working environment, juvenile detention centre. It's the environment that counts.
Yeah.
And on a selfish level, it felt like a place to heal. The focus wasn't on me. I wasn't the athlete, and every day you're so into what you're doing, with your body, your nutrition, your sleep, your health, your performance. The focus wasn't on me, and it was really refreshing. The young boys in there, they didn't care. Oh, they knew about my AFL career, and that was a great gateway to communication. But that wasn't the focus. The focus was them.
Yeah.
So I was very privileged to be in that space, and it was very tough to leave, actually, at the end. I feel like I've been really fortunate with 3 or 4 amazing roles in my life, being an athlete, a coach, a mentor in the juvenile detention centre, and founder now of a youth mental health foundation. I feel very privileged.
I think all very impactful roles, absolutely. You mentioned founder of LifeChanger. What led you to focus on youth mental health, Scott?
It's always, the why question is always challenging to answer. And I'm always a little bit careful of just giving the media snapshot, because that then becomes the story. But it was multiple reasons. Won't have time to go into all of them here, but my environment, from my parents to my grandmother, there was a lot of care for the community, and I had amazing role models, and just giving back. My grandma, amazing Croatian lady, her house was the house where there was always someone at the table, that just needed to be there. So I'm sure through osmosis, you see those role models and you absorb that. So I think I was very fortunate. But the real turning point, it was the need. I had 3 of my own boys about to go through their teenage years, and looking at the statistics and the challenges that were sitting around young people, I didn't want to wait until, I had this feeling that, what if one of my boys fell down the trapdoor? And is that what needs to be the catalyst for you to move? And I really challenged myself on that. And it's like, well, do you care about the under 8, the 10-year-old that you coached, or the 15-year-old? And I do. So for me, it was the need, and I didn't want to turn back in 10 or 20 years and have the what if of maybe we could have helped one young person, or save a young kid. It was that really was the main driver. So the need, my own boys, I think it's important that I want to be a good role model for them, and legacy, but legacy not in an egotistical way. Not legacy, look at what I've done. I've got to look in the mirror at the end of the day, and so the only person I'm really questionable to, our family, but
Yeah.
I've got to ask the question of myself, and did you do the right thing with the opportunities that you've had? So yeah, those things are really important.
Yeah. And I said at the start, it impacted 141,000 young people over Australia and New Zealand. And I think that's a huge, huge number. And, I reflect on my own mental health journey, and I think, God, if I was given some of these tools at a young age, I wonder what, my adult life would have looked like, and differently. And I think it's so powerful to be empowering kids with these tools, because it's not just saving them now, Scott, it's also helping them through their adult years, and they will take these with them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, we do a great activity with young people, which we do with adults as well. And I encourage anyone to do it. It takes about 2 minutes, but just have your X and Y axes on a graph, and just put on there 3 high points and 3 low points. Don't even need to know what they are. Join the line in between, and then what do you see, right? So you see the ups and downs of your life. And then often what we'll do in a group is everyone will hold up their graph without talking about the highs and lows. And people will go, actually, I had a brilliant young 17-year-old last week. One girl stood up and she said, I said, what do you see with the graphs? And she said, they're all the same. And I said, you're right. And then the next girl stood up and she said, they're all different. I said, you're right too.
Yeah.
Right. But it was then I said, look, circle your lows. And what do you see after every low? You've got the capacity to rise, and then circle the highs. And what do you see? Well, there's probably another challenge going to come your way, and you're good enough, but be ready for it. So what was always important to me, and I think this is important to young and old people alike, is it's be preemptive. Build your tools and skills that help you work your way through whatever whatever on your roadmap going forward. Every classroom we go into, doesn't matter where we go, Australia, New Zealand, private school, public school, regional, CBD, it makes no difference. There's always 5 young people who are really struggling and right at the very precipice of the worst things that you can think of. And then there's 5 kids that are thriving, and we owe it to also the 5 kids that are thriving to prepare them at 12, 13, 14 for the time when they break up with their girlfriend at 23 or something happens. So forearmed is forewarned. Do the work early, and I think we can change some of the stats that exist.
Yeah, it's so powerful, preventative mental health. And I think it's such an important area to work in. Having worked with so many kids, Scott, what are you seeing is the biggest challenge that young people are facing today with regards to mental health?
There's a lot. There's a lot of different things. And I'll throw a few things in, and I'll break it into 2 categories, because there are some external triggers that are making it pretty challenging. And there's many here that I won't list because we don't have time. And then there's some internal challenges on how we're thinking, or how young people are thinking. So if I think external, tech is a challenge. Used the wrong way, it's a disconnecting. It can take young people away from, exercise and getting outdoors and a lot of things, right? Tech's a complicated beast. Shifting global environment, the geopolitical, kids are amazing at how much they know. And one amazing thing about this generation of young people is they are more socially aware than any generation that's come before. But the downside to that is also they are more socially aware.
Yeah.
Right. So everything that they're hearing politically, many of the challenges that are on the news, they absorb that at a different level. And that's a lot. That's a lot to take on. And when you're a young person and you have 90% of your life in front of you, you look at that runway and you sort of can assess it. You want a young person to look at that optimistically.
Yes.
It's that they should be looking at it going, man, I can shake up the world, right? But that's been really challenged. It's challenged by what they see. It was challenged by COVID. So, they're less certain of their future at the moment. And I think one of the other big external challenges is just parents being present.
Yeah.
You know, we're all busy. Two income households are pretty much the norm, and it's time. You know, it's prioritizing the time that needs to be spent. So there's lots of other things, but internally, what we see in young people, and these are some concerns and some things we need to really think about. It's been brilliant that we're much more aware of mental health and the conversations around mental health. I think the whole awareness that's been created in the last 10 years is really, really important. Being aware, and then also not being limited by a label that you put on yourself. So it's a really fine line between creating a self-limiting belief. So even the language we use around, you know, I have anxiety. So I think we need to challenge the language, because it's not part of you. It's something that you are experiencing.
Yes.
Right. But it's also not just feeling like that's just me. Right.
Yes.
It's an experience that you need to be able to manage and work through. But I think the labels we've got to be careful now. Because the last thing we want to do.
Much. Yeah. As someone who has experienced anxiety, Scott, I'm very careful at saying I experience anxiety from time to time, as opposed to I have anxiety, because I think it comes in waves like that graph you spoke about.
Yeah.
And it's not that you are that person with anxiety all the time.
Yeah. And linked very closely to that, and we sort of touched on this one as well, is I guess when you're, and it's more so for a young person, because once you've got a few more miles on the clock, you sort of know that, hey, there's going to be some ups and downs, and hopefully you've had some experience where, you know, I don't want anyone to have any downs, but you've had a down or a challenging time, and you've been able to find your way through. So you have a memory, or a confidence. It should be a confidence boosting memory on, hey, that was a hard time, and I've been able to still make my way through it, right? But one of the things with young people is, if you know that every challenge is not a trauma, and resilience is built by facing challenge, right? And you're going to have some heartbreaking moments along the journey. You know, even more so than from a sporting perspective, you know, it's just going to come. So if young people and all of us are more understanding that, hey, this is part of it. This is part of living. It's not necessarily, I've now faced this once in a lifetime trauma. And I say that certainly not wanting to diminish anyone's challenging experiences. I sit in no judgment on that at all. But I think there are some things we can go, you know what, this is really hard. This is a challenge. But I know that this is part of life, and it brings a more real perspective to it, rather than it's just something that's catastrophically happened. It is part of the journey, and we've got to understand that.
And I think, to your point, young people don't have the context of that it happens and they've come out the other side. And I call them proof points. As we get older, we've got proof points that we can do it, right? You just have to go back to those proof points when you're having a tough time. Unfortunately, like you said, young people just don't have that context yet.
Oh, if you could give them one thing, I was thinking about this earlier today, if you could give young people one thing, it's the benefit of hindsight that you have when you're older, or experience. Because so often we ask the question of adults, you know, what would you go back and say to your 13-year-old self? And often the response, we get many, but often the response is, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right? You've got what it takes. You're going to be okay. But when you're a 13-year-old, that's hard. That's a big concept. So that's why the conversations between adults and young people, you know, we talk about mentoring, but it's just the conversations at the dinner table. And, you know, one great thing that parents can do is have conversations about the tough challenges that you have faced, and share them with, you know, your son, daughter, young person in your care, and let them know, because they often look at you as an adult and think that you're bulletproof. And you're not. You know, there's been times when we've all shed tears and felt really broken. And sharing that to know with a young person, so they know that, hey, my mum or dad has been through that. and they won't feel as alone with their own challenges when you do.
Yeah, I think it creates a vulnerability too that hopefully opens them up to feel like they can chat to their parents as well, which is really powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And storytelling, right? Storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to build empathy and understanding between two people. So I think that's great advice, Scott, for parents, because I was going to ask, what is one thing a parent can do to try and, check in with their kids and see how their mental health is going, and those conversations at the dinner table sound like a great piece of advice for parents.
Yeah, look, there's lots of tips and tricks, but I think the main thing really from a parent is to be there. Not to always have the answer. That's not always possible, but to be there with no judgment, to be present so they just know that you're there. About 2 years ago, the Sydney Brain and Mind Institute conducted a survey with thousands of parents in Australia. And the most alarming statistic that came from that was parents are spending no more than 18 seconds a day in meaningful conversation with a young person in their life, right?
Wow.
So when like every parent, as soon as I heard that, you do the audit. It's like, man, I've got 3 kids, am I spending enough time? And it's not just time, it's quality time. It's having the conversation. It's, getting out the front whilst you might be shooting hoops in the basketball ring and you're barely talking. It's just, you're just there and they know that you're in their space. We have mentors come into our workshops, adult mentors, and often they think they need to come in and it's their time to impart their 5 wisdoms. And in the training, we tell them, look, there'll be moments where you can share something from experience that'll be massively valuable, but that they just know that you're there is the biggest gift you can give them. So to parents, I would just say, do an audit on your time. And if you ask the question, what's the most important thing in your life, you're going to say your kids or your family. And if that's the case, find the time. Whatever it is, just find the time.
And that presence, right? Because I think, there's so much distraction with phones and things like that these days that even if you're there, sometimes you're not there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's challenging for the young people now because there are a lot of things competing for their time, and it's challenging for adults because, there's a disease of busyness, that is a challenge for everyone. So being really deliberate on what's important and where you place your time, and just taking some time to sit down and think about just that. That's time really well spent because you love your kids, right?
Yeah.
So we all do. So you got to make sure that, we deliver on that. We've got a responsibility as a parent, sometimes that can get away from all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. If a parent is listening and they're wanting to know what signs to look out for in their child for they might be struggling or they're a bit worried about mental health, are there a couple of things that they should look out for or things that they should notice?
Look, it can appear in a lot of different ways. In a classroom setting, we've got examples where visibly a young person looks absolutely like there's nothing wrong, and then they'll write something down in an activity that is heartbreaking. So it's challenging, and that's one of the real challenges with how someone's feeling. It's an internal thing, right? But any behavior that's different, it'll often manifest in isolation. More time spending in their room and not wanting to communicate. Motivation, if they're all of a sudden pulling away from things that they were really passionate about, whether it's sport or tech or art, if that's not really filling their bucket, that's a really good indicator as well. Just the way they communicate. Are they more anxious? Are they more angry? A lot of time the telltale signs are there. It's why I'm also a really big one. If you can get young kids into journaling, and even if it's just putting pen to paper for 2 or 3 sentences a day, then sometimes that's a really good place where they'll express how they're feeling. We have a guided journal at LifeChanger it promotes some joint activity between a parent. It's like you pick one activity and you just do it together once or twice a week and keep it pretty low pressure. Writing every day for many kids is going to be really challenging, but once a week, you can do it. And so it's finding those moments where you sort of, give them an opportunity to talk. But again, you've got to be there to see and feel that. So I guess that first point of being really, really present is still really important. And if it does appear, or if you notice anything, it's not sitting in judgment of it. It's just letting them know that, hey, it's okay that you feel crap.
Yeah.
That's part of it. Like, you're not meant to feel perfect every single day. It's just not possible. So, and that's a fear with a lot of young people too, where when you're feeling like that, you feel that, oh, why am I feeling like that? And I'm different. You're not. You're very normal. You're very normal. So as a parent, I think it's just even having a preemptive conversation, say, hey, there's going to be times when you're not feeling great. I just want you to know I'm here for you, whatever that might look like, and that it's pretty normal that you're going to have that as well. So I think it's important to set the environment where you've got to keep the communications as open as you can.
And I think normalizing it, like you said, Scott, is really important because kids in particular, I have observed, and I think it's a primal need to want to be like everyone else and to fit in. So if they feel like they're experiencing something that isn't normal, I would imagine that they're not always going to share that because they don't want to feel like they're different.
No, and that's why we do that life graph activity, and why it's really important that parents storytell and share and promote conversations, because when you've got a challenge, there is a tendency to feel like you're the only one that's got it, right? Because we withdraw a little bit. We become more introverted with our thoughts, and can shut off. But when you actually know that, hey, there's people around me, lots of people that are facing different challenges at different times, and there's highs and lows. There's times when my sister could be flying and I might be feeling like crap, but it could flip too. It normalizes it all. And there's real power to feeling like you are connected to a community and that you are different, but weirdly, brilliantly different.
Yeah.
But you are also like everyone else. You're human, and that's there's a power and a security that comes with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've given so many pieces of incredible advice today, Scott, and so many amazing sound bites. Is there one piece of advice that you would want to share with listeners to finish, whether it's around mental health or mindset?
Look, I think there's a couple of things. Like, I just never underestimate your own capability. Like, you have so much. Like, we don't even get close to maximizing our potential. We don't. No matter, we're all going to get to the end of it and not even get close to tapping out on what's possible, right? And that's every single person. What advice would I give? When I started, I guess, on a bit of a leadership journey many years ago, and it was through sport, I had an amazing mentor in Perth, and I actually said to him, what's it take to be a really good CEO or a good leader? And he said, about 7 days a year. I said, what do you mean by that? I was like thinking, this is the easiest job of all time. And he said, there'll be about 7 days a year where challenge will come at you in different ways. And he was talking in a business sense, but I think this is very much, it's very applicable to life. So, and then he said, when those days do come, or those moments come, they're the gift, right? And how you handle those days and how your perspective on those days, that's the opportunity. So no matter what comes, I try and stay in an athletic stance, and I don't mean that in a sporting way. So, look after your health now. Don't wait. There's a great quote that, you prepare for prepare for war in times of peace. So prepare your health now, right? I'm getting older. I'm in, mid-50s now, and I'm preparing for, 60, 70, 80, because I still want to be surfing with my boys and I want to be mobile. So be in an athletic stance. And the last thing I'll say is I've got a saying that, again, it was given to me many years ago, and it's shit happens, you're not special.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then are your thoughts helping or hindering you? And that's one I think it's good to check in. Is what I'm thinking, is it moving me forward? Or is it keeping me stuck? Right? Because you've only got so much energy and so much focus, but you get a choice.
Yeah.
You always get a choice on where you place it. So place it on the higher plane. Keep your thoughts high. No matter what it is, keep your thoughts high. And the last one is, no matter what the circumstance, hunt for good. And it might take 3 months, it might take a year for you to really understand what the good was. But no matter what, it is always there. For me, when I guess I had the health scare last year, I wasn't kissing my wife enough. As just silly as that sounds, I was like, I want to give my wife a kiss every day, because I love her. So those moments put things in focus. So my advice is, just when the challenges come, keep perspective, and you're good enough to deal with it. You really are.
Thank you so much, Scott. That has been such a powerful conversation. I feel like I want to go back and listen to this episode myself and just take so many notes, because there's been so many powerful perspectives that you've been able to share, both from a parent perspective, a mental health perspective, and a performance and motivation perspective. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining.
And it's a pleasure. I love what you do, and it's been a real privilege being on the podcast.
Thanks for joining me on Work and Wellness. If today's episode resonated with you, remember, someone in your network might need to hear this too. Share it with a colleague or friend who could use these insights. I'd love to keep the conversation going, so find us on Instagram at Mind Your Grit, where we share daily tips and continue these discussions. And if you found value in today's episode, please take time to rate and review the show. It makes such a huge difference and helps other people discover conversations they might really need. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Each week, we're building a community of people who believe that success and well-being go hand in hand. You can find the notes, resources, and links from today's episode at mindyourgrit.com. This is Work and Wellness with Angela Davies. Your work matters, your wellness matters, and this is where it all comes together. See you next week.